Hi, I'm Steve Lockard, Managing Director of OpenMinds. We're sitting on the beautiful Stanford campus today working on our grid vision, which for OpenMinds is a flagship project where we're really focused on how do we meet the need for tremendous load growth, 800 gigawatts or so over the next 10 years, 3.5% load growth that the U.S. just has not experienced at all. And we need more energy to match up with our AI data centers, with domestic manufacturing, with EV charging and the like. But we also need to figure out how to do this in an affordable and reliable way. And from an open mind standpoint, we need to do it with less emissions over time as well. So huge challenges. Thrilled to be joined today by Chairman and former Chairman, but Jon Wellinghoff, and spent a number of years helping to lead the FERC, and just has tremendous experience in this space and wisdom that he can share, and involved in some other new and exciting things. And Bill Flores, who's a former member of Congress, is spending time these days helping ERCOT figure out how to navigate their world. So guys, thanks very much for spending some time with us. And maybe we could just start with, what are you up to, Jon, these days, and what are you losing sleep over?
Sure, Steve. Well, right now I got a full-time job. I'm the Chief Regulatory Officer for a company called Voltus, which is a demand response and distributed energy resource platform for providing consumers with assistance in getting into wholesale markets. So we do VPPs, we work with data centers, we work with all series of customers, from large industrials, commercial customers, all the way down to actually residential customers, and work with their behind-the-meter resources and get those resources into markets, and do it in an efficient, effective way to support the grid and support reliability, and also provide those consumers with payments back from those markets to actually help them reduce their energy bills.
Interesting. And what's keeping you up at night these days?
Well, I'll tell you what's keeping me up at night is what I see is exponential growth in AI data centers. Electric load growth is projected to just go through the ceiling, and I see that clashing with exponential decay, which I would characterize the utility industry. I think that industry is decaying. I think it's got some serious problems at all levels, at the transmission all the way down to the distribution level, and resource adequacy, reliability as well. And I see that clash as one where you've got, for-profit competitive technologies like AI working again at an exponential level, but yet you've got a largely non-competitive industry, absent Texas. And I love Texas and what a lot of things Bill and ERCOT has done, because they are very competitive there, but the rest of the U.S. is not very competitive, unfortunately. And as a result, we have a very moribund system that, does not move at the pace that we need to move it to, meet this challenge of AI and exponential growth.
So infrastructure delay, but also a system that is a bit stuck. We're not keeping up, even with our own changes.
And it's because of a lot of legacy systems of having, investor-owned monopolies in this country, that there are, 3,000 utilities in this country. There are 500 transmission owners in this country, and we've got, 50 state jurisdictions who have some level of jurisdiction, and the FERC, and you put that all into a pot, and it doesn't move very quickly.
Thanks, Jon. Bill, you've taken on some new assignments, and by the way, thank you for your decades of service to our country and our industry. But how about for you? What are you doing these days, and what are you worried about?
Well, let me start with what keeps you awake at night, and that is that the challenge of AI. This is a race that the United States has to win. We cannot lose leadership in AI. And so that's also what keeps me awake at night, is what does it take to make that happen? And so it takes people, it takes knowledge, intellectual property, and lots of energy. And so now we go into what I'm working on right now. First of all, I'm a board member. I'm a governance person. I'm not a manager. So we have a great team of managers at ERCOT that handle what I would consider to be probably the world's most dynamic grid. And so let me give you an example of that. We're looking at a growth profile. Well, it took us 100 years to get to the grid we have today in Texas, which will support a peak load demand of probably 95 gigawatts. We're looking to add 50% of that in less than 5 years. That's like adding California to the Texas grid in 5 years. And so it takes of the 2,000 market participants that we have, it's going to take all of them collaborating, working together, dealing with supply chain challenges, trying to make sure that we can meet the ever-changing demands or the ever-changing requirements of the demand side. I mean, we still have a large industrial base that looks at power one way. You have data centers that look at power another way, and they view it through different lenses. And so we have to manage this new grid to handle both types of demands.
Yeah, no, for sure. And even if our average over 10 years is north of 3% nationally, in terms of electricity growth, the state of Texas is probably more like 10%
We
in that time frame. There are pockets of growth that are far in excess of the national average.
That's right. Last year was more than 5%. It was like 5.6%. And if you look at the next 5 years, you're looking at well north of 10% per year. So again, take 100 years worth of grid that's been built and then add 50% of that in 5 years. That's a heck of a challenge.
So you've all experienced some of the growth, tremendous success of deregulated markets and renewable penetration and all the good stuff around Texas. It's happened, but not without some challenges along the way as well. So what lessons are learned from ERCOT that FERC might consider, or vice versa? Why don't you keep going, Bill?
I'll expand on what you talked about. I mean, a multi-state grid has challenges because you're dealing with several different sets of policymakers. ERCOT just has to deal with one set of policymakers and one rulemaker. We deal with the state legislature and the governor, and we deal with the Public Utility Commission. And so that means that if a need is identified in Texas, and as long as the policymaker's on board, the rulemaker is on board, you can move pretty quickly. Of course, you've got to have all the industry participants there to invest the capital to make it happen. And you have to hope that you have a market structure that supports people wanting to invest that capital, because you've got to have a huge amount of resource growth to meet that demand. And we've got to have a revenue structure in the market that will support that.
Yeah, we're seeing examples with CenterPoint and others leaning in hard on advanced reconductoring to optimize the grid. Some of the
Right.
tools
Right.
in the toolbox, but
I'm excited about that.
a willingness to lean in on some of those things and help make it happen has been an important part of the leadership that I feel like we've seen demonstrated within ERCOT.
That's true. And if you look at what we call the 765 step plan, it's a 765,000 volt new backbone for Texas. The build out of that system, along with all the supporting lower voltage systems, will cost north of $30 billion over the next 7 years or so. But it should create a 21st century superhighway for electrons, which is what we need. And I'm hoping that ERCOT can serve it as an example as to how to plan it, develop it, get your market participants on board, and build it in record time.
What do you think?
Well, there's a lot of things to learn from Texas. There's what they're doing with the 765 backbone. They're also what they already did with the CREZ project, which was the renewables, moving the renewables from West Texas, all the wind areas, into the areas where the loads are in Dallas and Houston. And again, the competition they have there. I think the things they could learn from FERC were some of the things where we actually failed, and that is, implementation is very important. We put Order 1000 in place, which was a transmission planning order where we intended to have competition in the development of transmission across the U.S., and the utilities clawed that back in each one of the states. They went to state legislatures and clawed that back, and they did everything they could to resist that. Texas has been very good about, maintaining this competitive atmosphere and competitive structure that somehow needs to get spread across the U.S. in some way that we can ultimately see the infrastructure bill that we need to have done. And I think, again, I give great kudos to Texas for what they've done. Now, the only criticism I have is Texas. I still think that they should strongly interconnect with the rest of the U.S., because I think they could actually reduce their prices ultimately by having those interchanges between other regions of the country that sometimes do have lower prices than they do on an average wholesale basis. So, I think stronger interconnections across all regions would be very helpful. But again, this whole idea of having more competitive opportunities and competitive building of infrastructure and competitive delivery of energy services and the way they have retail competitors in Texas, I think are things that we need to strive for.
On that point of connecting, outside of ERCOT, what do you think there? And Pablo and the guys are working pretty hard on a range of opportunities to improve.
We're looking at opportunities to improve in several areas. We are also looking at additional DC ties to connect the Texas grid with other grids. If you have an AC linkage, then you become subject to FERC. And I think we've already talked about it.
You don't want to do that.
Exactly. Okay. I'm glad to hear you say that, because that would be something that would not be plausible for any Texas policy. Well, let me say this: very few Texas policymakers are a rule maker. Now, the challenge is, if you think about it, when you look at reliability, you're always looking at N-1. So if you lose a power plant or a transmission line, and then you lose one more, what does that do to the reliability of the system? So if you think about building interconnections with other grids, then those suddenly become part of the N-1 formula. So if you have a 4 gigawatt connection to another state, then suddenly that becomes a huge point that you have to plan around if that were to fail for some reason. So it'd be like losing 4 nuclear units in Texas. Those are things you have to be careful. You have to think through this all the way. So yeah, it sounds grand to be a non-FERC participant in a multi-state grid, but then you have to think about the physics of it as well. So
And assure the reliability.
Exactly.
As you make those changes.
no matter what happens, physics will rule. Physics and economics will rule. They'll beat policymaker dreams every time, or rulemaking every time. And so that's what the folks at ERCOT are really good at doing, is making sure that the physics and the economics work.
Bill, are there areas, just to wrap up, are there areas of momentum that you're excited about, things you feel good about these days?
There are, and I'll have to give you a little bit of a walk down memory lane for a second to get to where I want to go with this. About 4.5 years ago, when I joined the ERCOT board, I started getting invited to give talks to industry groups. And there was an emerging business at the time in the cryptocurrency area, cryptocurrency mining. And so all the cryptocurrency miners wanted to move to Texas. And they kind of wanted to be freewheeling, cowboys. So give us the power when we need it, and we won't use it when we don't need it. And I kept saying, you need to be good grid citizens. And that is, come on in, we'll get you connected, but when we get tight, we need you off. And they didn't want to volunteer to do that. And I said, look, let me tell you this as a former policymaker, former member of Congress, sometimes if you don't proactively do things, some policymaker will make a decision for you that you may not like. So let me take you to where we are today. We've got this huge data center growth in Texas, and most of the data center operators are adopting a philosophy of what I call being a good grid citizen. Even the CEO of Google in an announcement in December said, we're going to be good grid citizens in Texas. We're going to bring our own power, and when we can interconnect, we'll make sure that if you need us, we're going to be there up to 100%, 10% of our generation, of our load capacity. And so I thought, okay, we're seeing good momentum. We're seeing that people are thinking outside the box and thinking proactively about how can we not only benefit from being part of the grid in Texas, but how can we contribute to the overall reliability and resilience of the grid. I'm excited about that.
Yeah, excellent. Thank you. What do you think, John?
Well, I'll tell you,
Positive momentum.
what I'm seeing is increased recognition that consumers have resources behind the meter that are valuable, that can be used. Voltus, for example, has brought forward this concept of BYOC, bring your own capacity, where data centers want to come and connect to the grid, but they've got to, in many instances, deliver capacity either internally with their own footprint with batteries or, gen sets or other things. But what Voltus is doing is partnering with those data centers saying, look, we will go to the industrial customers in your area, we'll go to consumers at the residential area, and we'll find out where they have load flexibility that we can deliver to you, that you can then deliver back to the grid to show that as a package ultimately, so that can get connected quicker, because that's the big thing with these hyperscalers. It's all about how quickly they can get connected to the grid. And so we can help them do that, and we can do that with this concept because we can bring consumers into that package. And that helps not only the hyperscaler, the data center, but it also helps the consumer because that consumer is actually getting money from the hyperscaler to participate in that, and that lowers their energy bill. So everybody, comes out.
And we're seeing on Bring Your Own Capacity, we have a panel on it tomorrow, demand flexibility, but then also localized storage and the
Yes,
storage of
yes,
batteries alone at the residential level,
Right.
teamed with air conditioning or,
Right.
or fuel pumps or whatever it might be, fuel cleaning pumps, or even within the distribution network.
Right. Well, and when with the advent of EVs, right now I have 200 kilowatts in my garage.
Yeah.
Because I have 2 electric cars. I have enough power there to do something for the grid, and you add that up among a whole community, you've got a tremendous amount of resources that can be tapped into and be used.
Yeah. Excellent.
I have to agree with you. I mean, we started a pilot program 3 years ago in ERCOT called ADER, Aggregate Distributed Energy Resources. It's easier for me to say VPP.
Yeah.
But we started the first phase of a pilot program. We're on phase 3 right now, and we're having residential consumers sign up for it. Working with the industrial community to try to get it done on an industrial scale too. But I think there's a real untapped potential there that would be greatly beneficial to our grid as well as the rest of the country.
Nice. Well, gentlemen, thanks so much for your decades of service and your
you,
wisdom
Steve.
shared with the Grid Vision team. And if you're interested in continuing to follow, check out our website for OpenMinds. Check out the Grid Vision plan. Follow us on LinkedIn, and we'll look forward to keeping you updated on our progress. Thanks very much.